Games that had memorable weather. And I think probably at least three out of the 4 games that I picked, most of you guys weren't even born yet. Kind of shows my age, and honestly, this is one of those things we'd go on for hours. Everybody has their most memorable, weather event at a Penn State game, and it could be an away game too. But I chose 4, 3 in the 1980s and 1 in the 1990s. So with that, the first one that comes to mind, and this, by the way, is the only Penn State loss that I chose of the 4 games. This was one of those cases. 1983 was a year where the heat, I called it a year of recurring heat. It would cool down, you'd get fronts coming through, it would warm back up, we'd get heat, and then it would keep back and forth, back and forth. It was doing that all through July and into August. It was pretty dry late summer here that year, and really, when you look at historically, for State College to get hot, when I'm talking hot 90 or better in the month of September, it really has to be dry. It almost has to be, or else it's just not going to happen. So this 1983 versus Cincinnati. Like I said, Penn State unfortunately lost the game, but it was the late season heat wave. High temperature that day, 93 degrees. I mean, think about that. Some summers in middle of July with perfect setup with 590 heights, we can't get it to 93 here. And here it was September 10th. And I do remember being at that at the stadium that day for the game, and there were a number of people. I don't have any statistics on it, but I do know that there were people that actually suffered from heat stroke that day. And like my little note there, probably alcohol. Not probably. Alcohol was a factor in some of that problem that existed that day. But that was just so memorable. How hot it was, the sun blazing down in early September. The second one that comes to mind, totally opposite end of the spectrum here, 1985, November 16th. This was a cold, steady rainstorm the entire game, temperatures in the 30s, just a miserable day. We got over an inch of rain that day. And now we're going to look at the setup here. I'm going to go through all 4 of the events here, and then we're going to go to the E-wall and actually look at the setup, what happened on these days. But this was a classic cold air damming situation in and east of the mountains. It was actually just cold enough over the mountains, the higher elevations, probably above 1,700 feet or so, where it was actually freezing on contact. And you could see from Beaver Stadium, you could actually see some ice up on Mount Nittany. The next one, the famous Ice Bowl, 1987, another Notre Dame game, and a very close game right to the very end. That game, as far as I'm concerned, that was the coldest Penn State game, home game, that I could ever remember. The high temperature, the actual high that day was 21, but during the game, temperatures were mostly in the teens. And I was looking at the ranking when you go to the website there, and it shows what the ranking is for that day. It was the coldest max temp on record for that date. Just an amazing early season cold shot. Winds gusting to and past 30 miles per hour at times, and wind chills were near and below zero. Just an incredibly cold day for that early in the season. There were some flurries and squalls around from time to time, and the ground, I mean, usually in the fall, the ground is still soft and warm at this time of the year in the fall, but the ground was like, it was frozen solid like concrete during that game. So you could just imagine, the football players getting hit and banging down on that hard ground. Again, a very, very close game, and Penn State won it at basically the last minute. And then the last one I had is a memorable game was 1995. This is against Michigan. Penn State won that 27-17, and I called it some people referred to it as the Snow Bowl. There was a big early season heavy wet snowstorm that occurred earlier that week, mostly kind of centered on the 14th of November 1995. There was some rain for a time during that storm, a very wet storm. I remember where I lived out near Bellefonte at the time, looking at Bald Eagle Ridge, or as they call it, the locals, Purdue Mountain. There's a power line that goes over the mountain there. I remember watching there that evening, and you could just see pop, pop, pop. I mean, all the with the weight of the branches and the weight of the snow, the power going out. Where we lived out there, our power was out for like 33 or 34 hours. Parts of the county, it was even like double that amount of time. You know, with all that heavy, wet snow bringing down power lines and everything. Just a real dynamic situation. I think the total, it was a little less than 18. Mr. Cyrep probably has the exact number. It was rounded to 18. It was over 17, maybe a little less than 18, but it was big, wet snowstorm. The high temperature now on game day, this is a few days later now, the high temperature 36 and the low is 32. The snow depth on game day was 9 inches. The interesting thing about that, the Beaver Stadium, for the game to go on that day, it had to be shoveled out. And so they asked for volunteers. Even Michigan fans were there shoveling the stands out. And it was a crunch time. They had to get it done. So working around the clock, they even got inmates from Rockview, the local state correctional institution and Center County Prison, to shovel out the stand. So quite a memorable day. Here's a little quote about the Ice Bowl, and you could read that. Of course, the coldest game ever, Beaver Stadium history. But I like the ending there. That was a neat quote by Joe Paterno, Coach Paterno. Always be frozen in the history of Penn State football. That's a neat quote there. But that was a very, very memorable game weather-wise, and game football-wise too. And here's some quotes about the Snow Bowl, the 1995 Snow Bowl. A lot of the stuff kind of covers the setup there, really centering on the 14th, about 15 inches on that day alone, talking about getting the volunteers to clear out the stands. And like this point down here, the students actually had to be warned numerous times not to throw snowballs during the game. And it was piled high around the students in the stands, and there were actually about 80,000 fans that showed up for the game that day. And I do have a little treat, and hopefully we have quiet enough and there's enough sound that's going to come out of the speaker here, and I actually have at least a part of a YouTube video that we're going to play for you guys.
All going to fire and get cozy. We've got a good game coming your way, but you know, Jack, it is really a minor miracle that we're able to play it all here in Happy Valley. An awful lot of people thought on Wednesday when the snow started that this game might get transferred to Ann Arbor. It is indeed a miracle.
Let it snow, let it snow, let it snow.
Before the snow even stopped falling, the call went out for volunteers. They were going to pay them $5 an hour to try and shovel off the 93,000 seats. Some people turned out, but they needed more help as well. They went to the local penal institutions, got some of the prisoners to come out and shovel 24 hours a day. Then folks that drove in from Ann Arbor, Michigan fans, they said, give us the shovels, we'll help as well. All the seats are uncovered. There's a lot of snow, but I'll tell you what, this field is ready. The track is very, very good. There is one sidebar, though. This is the sideline right here, only about 4 yards away.
Number 50,
is where all the snow has ended up. And it
just
is
got hit by a
very hard
snowball.
pass. And I'll tell you what, Brett, if you start to run a sideline pass, Robert, try to go to the sideline, you could end up thinking you're playing an arena football game instead of a college football game. We're going to have to get some cover as well from the snowballs. All right, Jack. Thank you.
Thought that would be fun to incorporate that in there. So back to our PowerPoint. And now, as far as the setup goes for those events, I'm going to just go through quickly. This is from the e-wall, and we're just going to go through each one. This is the 1983 setup here, and of course, real quickly, you can see the 500 millibar pattern. There's the 588 line there, and go over here. There's your setup at the surface. Again, it was just a classic case. It was dry. We had high heights, just a perfect setup at the surface, and it really went to town temperature-wise. That was that 93-degree day. So we go back in here. Bear with me here. Now let's go to the second one. This is the 1985 setup here. This is that cold rainstorm. And I guess if we really concentrate on the surface here, we go out through, got to about 15, 18 Z that day, and you could just see, look at the cold air damming. That's a 1030, probably over a 1036 high, going through Maine, and a good cold air damming situation. That, and if you looked at the 850s, I mean the 850 line, zero line was actually not that far away. So just a raunchy, cold, rainy day from start to finish with some ice over the mountains. We'll go back in. Now we'll look at the, this is the 1987. Take a look. I mean, this is just unbelievable. The look at that trough. Talk about a trough. I mean, that would do January proud there. I mean, that's, you know, that's the third week of November there. And look at the thicknesses. Now that, I believe, that would be in the start. Let's go kind of middle of the day. Let's go to 18Z. Let's go to 18Z and see what it looks like that day. Look at those thicknesses. I mean, this line here, this is your 510 line. So what do we have, like 50, 505, 504? I mean, this is just unbelievable thicknesses here for November 21st, and no wonder it stayed in the teens all day long. And you look at that flow, and there's, you know, certainly a connection over the lakes, and it's no surprise that we had some snow flurries and squalls that day as well. Now finally we're going to do the 95. What I'm going to do is actually show you the, first of all, the 14th. This would actually be on the 14th, when kind of at the peak of the storm, when things were happening that day. And maybe we'll go to 18Z that day, kind of look at the weather map, look at the 500 millibar, negatively tilted shortwave there, deep trough, well down and digging well down into the southeastern part of the country. And there's your surface map, and there's your 540 line. So, I mean, you could tell, you know, this time of the year, middle of November, it is going to be a very wet snow. It was just cold enough to snow. The East Coast areas, we're just getting rain out of that, but back here, we were just cold enough, and it just went to town with the heavy wet snow. And then finally, I'll actually take a look at what it looked like on the day of the game. It was chilly. It was a lot of clouds. And again, the main thing, we were recovering from the aftermath of that big snowstorm. There's 18Z, little weak clipper coming into the lakes. There's your thicknesses, you know, like near just about below 540, 538 or whatever. So a chilly day, a cloudy day, and temperatures were in the 30s. I seem to remember there wasn't a whole lot of wind that day either. So anyway, hopefully you enjoyed the little tour here. And like I said, everyone here, you could probably have your own set of, you know, 4, 5, 6 memorable games weather-wise for Penn State games, either locally here in State College or perhaps an away game that you decided to go to. Now, let's get into the current situation, or at least the past day or so, and then we'll move forward. Obviously, there's been a powerful storm. It moved out of the Rockies into the Plain States, and it's now, that should say now, I did this at about 6:30 this morning, so I don't think I had my second cup of coffee yet. It's heading into the upper Midwest. It's a very strong jet streak fueled the storm. There's good thermal contrast as well. The early season snowstorm in the Rockies. Denver had some snow. Actually, some areas within 30, 40 miles of Denver had over a foot of snow. Oops, let's go. Strong thunderstorms. That was the other part of the storm. That's very classic, very typical of a transition season storm, either in the spring or in the fall. On the warm side of the storm, we had some very strong thunderstorms, some severe in the Midwest. The area that was particularly hard hit, Iowa, northern Missouri, and Illinois, even 10 reports of tornadoes. And the other part of that is a lot of wind, very strong low-level jet, a tight pressure gradient, and we had some damaging winds in some locations. This is actually the SPC storm report for the 11th, for yesterday, and you could see where the severe weather was centered out there. A lot of wind reports, some hail, but mostly wind, and even some tornado reports as well. And here's a snowfall picture around Denver. I think Denver had, maybe close to a half a foot, give or take, but the higher elevations, the mountains, certainly did much better than that. Kind of the big ticket items going forward with that storm. Now, I was looking at the intensity of the low. I think it's probably maxed out this morning. It's probably getting ready to occlude, or it is starting to occlude some. So yeah, it's still going to be a strong storm as it heads across the northern lakes and into southern Canada here in the short term, the next 24 to 36 hours. But I think we probably have reached our lowest pressures on that low pressure system. Again, some of the strong gusty winds we're talking about, that corridor really from near Chicago through lower Michigan, northern Indiana, parts of Ohio, and into southwest Ontario. That seems to be the core where the strongest wind gusts are going to be, but there's a pretty large area where you're going to get wind gusts over 40 miles per hour today, and of course that's going to transfer farther eastward over the next 24 hours or so. Of course, a pretty impressive chilly shot, not nearly what happened back in 1987, but it certainly is going to feel, especially it's pretty nice out there, actually feels pretty balmy out there today, and it's going to be a big change in the way it feels around here later tomorrow night, and if you're out and about on Saturday with the wind and the temperatures where they are, certainly considerably below normal. This was actually a snapshot. I did this, I think it was either, I think it was 11Z this morning, and you can look at the gradient is, it looks a lot stronger than what it really is, because it's analyzed internally at on our system at AccuWeather, a database. It analyzes it every 1/10 of a millibar, so the gradient is stronger than what it really looks like, or it looks stronger than what it really is. But bottom line, look at your low pressure system up there. That's about a 10. What's that, about a 984, 985 in that ballpark there over east central Wisconsin at 11Z this morning. So a very potent low pressure system, and that tells the story too. You go up above, go to 300 or 250 or 200. Look at that jet streak there. That's a very potent, a very noticeable jet streak aimed east-northeastward there. Certainly that's part of the equation why the storm was as strong as it was. There's our 500 millibar pattern this morning as well. Again, a very strong system heading across the lakes, and that's going to kind of roll eastward or east-northeastward here over the next 24 hours or so. There's your 700 millibar, and you can really see how this matched up where your 700 millibar moisture was, that area of rain, showers, whatever that came through here this morning, which is now past this, and that's coinciding pretty well with that. That was actually a snapshot this morning at about 7 o'clock this morning, and you could see over on the wall there where that precip has shifted over to since then over the last 4 or 5 hours, shifted eastward, and you have actually had a nice little dry swath coming in behind it. There's your 850s this morning, pretty mild here in the east, and you've got your chillier air coming in behind the storm, and there really is, you could actually envision there being a secondary front. There certainly is a very strong short wave that'll be coming through here tomorrow afternoon, tomorrow evening, and for all intents and purposes, you could just look at that as a secondary cold front that's coming through. There's your 850s on Saturday, and so they're pretty chilly. Again, they're not anything out of the ordinary. It's nothing like you wouldn't see from time to time during the month of November, but it's pretty chilly. I mean, there's your 0 line, there's your your -5 line. I mean, it's your -10 line actually, and that's some pretty chilly air at 850. There's no doubt. But the one thing though, it's not steady state. It's not hanging on for a couple of days or 4 or 5 days. It's transient. It's blowing on through, and it's going to be a quick shot. And that's kind of been the history of what's been happening so far this fall. I wanted to show you the Great Lakes water temperatures, and in particular, you really want to focus there on Lake Erie. You've got a lot of Lake Erie that's above 50 degrees. I actually got a pocket there that's still above 55 degrees Fahrenheit. And so, you know, the water temperatures at this time of the year are still going to be relatively warm. And I'd say right now, if you just average it out, you could just say Lake Erie is basically 50 to 55 degrees going into this weekend, you know, the next couple of days. Now, speaking of that, certainly think there's potential. It's almost a given. In my mind, it's like a given. There's going to be some lake effect snow. If you remember that shot we had, the cold shot back in October, was that the 18th, 17th, somewhere around in there, and there was lake effect. This is like a month ago, basically. It happened 4 weeks ago, whatever it was, and there was lake effect snow then, and there were some surprise amounts that showed up. Now, it was localized. It wasn't widespread, but there were some pretty impressive amounts locally that showed up in northwest PA, western New York State, inland from the lake, and also downwind of Lake Ontario. And so this is a snow total that it's trying to forecast here, you know, through Sunday morning. I think this is off of the Euro. You know, in my opinion, that's a 1 to 3 or a 2 to 4 pockets up there. That's almost a given. And locally, I could see more. I would be surprised if we didn't see some local amounts higher. So let's do the math from our basic meteorology here. Lake Erie, like I said, no lower than 50. Some places it's near 55, let's say in that 10 to 13 degree Celsius. That's about what Lake Erie is right now. Your 850 millibar temps are actually progged to bottom out around -6, -7. Some of the models are even saying -8, but like I said, even if we are very conservative, let's say it only got to -5, and let's say we use the low end on the water temperature of 50, which is plus 10 degrees C. Just do a little math there. What are we coming up with? 20 degrees Celsius difference, and that's way more than what we need to just get lake effect to get going. You need that 13 degrees, and we're going to have way more than what we actually need. We do have some of the other setup too. Like I said, I mentioned that round of lake effect that we had around the third week of October. There were pockets, there were a few spots. If you look at the co-op reports, you look at some of the public reports of 6 to 10 inches. Even I think somebody up in New York State had like 11. If this were steady state enough, it would be probably very similar this time. Could even be more. Maybe, like I said, this is hypothetical, but maybe the upper trough is a little bit too transient. It blows on through a little bit too quickly, so it just doesn't have enough time to really do its thing. But the caveat to that is, yeah, you got very good cyclonic curvature and good surface convergence going on for a while. So, you know, again, my gut feeling on this one is that you're going to see a lot of 2s, 3s, 4s, you know, in your typical places up near Bradford, Jamestown, Olean. But I would be shocked if I didn't see at least a few reports over 6 inches by the time it's all said and done. Kind of think we are going to see some snowflakes in the air down here to Happy Valley. I don't think it's any big deal, but I don't know what you guys thought about that. If you thought we're going to see some snowflakes down here, I kind of think we are, just given the setup there. And again, we're not talking about any big deal, but I think we probably do see a few snowflakes. And who knows? Maybe we'll be surprised, and somebody will get like for about a minute or two, a little coating on the ground. Now, the other part of the equation here is the gusty winds. Now, this is off of the Euro, and this is for 0Z Saturday. This is tomorrow evening. And look at that sounding. I mean, look at how well mixed that is. Very unstable looking atmosphere here tomorrow evening, and a pretty well aligned flow here on the wind profile. The models are going to differ on the amount of moisture in the low levels and so forth, and the timing of things, but they all have the same basic idea, that it's going to get very unstable around here with the crashing heights. I think the heights, if you do an average of the models, I think the heights here in State College, they crash like 100 meters tomorrow. So anytime I see that, anytime, being a meteorologist, it's like bing, 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 lights start going off and bells and whistles and, and alarms. It's like, well, that's a pretty good amount of height falls in a short period of time. Something's got to give. And like I said, it's getting very, very unstable. So do we get some precip, brief showers? Gusty winds are certainly going to be a factor. There's no doubt about that. We're pulling down anything that comes through. We're going to be able to mix down some of that air from aloft very easily with a sounding that's looking like that. Now, this is actually a wind profile, and I think this is actually off of the GFS. Again, they're all very similar, give or take, 5, 6, 7 knots here and there on the timing. But wanted to point this out here as we go. This is look at this is 0Z on the 14th. So right here, this line right here. Look at the 925 millibar winds, 280 at 42 knots. Look at 850, 280 at 54 knots. So, in my opinion, I think a wind gust, to around or a little over 40 miles per hour is almost a given, in my opinion. Maybe not every single location is going to get that, but I think 40 to 45 is a pretty good estimate of some of the peak winds we get late tomorrow evening. I wouldn't be shocked if somebody around here got a 50 mile per hour gust or better, given that setup there. Certainly the places that are more exposed to a west wind, elevated places and so forth, that'll come into play. Like if you're up at the top of Beaver Stadium. So my quick look ahead to State College for the rest of this afternoon, obviously, and over for the next several days. We're not done yet. The actual front is still west of here, and you can kind of see that on the latest radar. And I know some of the shorter range, the 4K NAM, the HER has been hinting at least some scattered, maybe a solid line, maybe it's more scattered, broken line of showers that comes through here late this afternoon, early evening, maybe after 4 or 5 o'clock, 6, somewhere in there, late afternoon, early evening. I think we have a shot at a brief shower. And then probably the rest of tonight, most of tonight should be dry. We get temps dropping off to near 40. I do think there'll be a fair amount of wind tonight, but the strongest winds are yet to come. And I kind of envision tomorrow being a day where, like right off the bat, it's pretty brisk, blustery, but the winds actually increase. They pick up during the days. It gets more and more unstable, with probably the windiest time tomorrow being after 3 or 4 o'clock and on into the early evening hours tomorrow. I think that time period, maybe it's 3 to 7, maybe it's 4 to 8, 2 to 6, somewhere in there is probably our windiest time period. And that's when we have our best shot at getting the strongest wind gusts. And this is what I've been kind of thinking for tomorrow, as the heights crash, as that short wave comes in from the northwest, that secondary front, if we want to call it that, I think it's a pretty good chance we get at least some spotty, brief showers around with that. It wouldn't take much to get a sprinkle, a brief shower. I wouldn't even be surprised if, like at 5 p.m. here tomorrow, there's a grapple. As a grapple shower somewhere, given where the 850s are at that time. The coldest air has not gotten here yet, but I think at that time we're like -3, -4 or so. It's November. I mean, it happened. I actually have a picture. Should have brought that one in to show you guys. Back in October, I had a grapple shower at my place and actually briefly coated my deck. So I could certainly see that happening here tomorrow. I got a high of 47. Give or take, I think certainly we're going to stay in the 40s, but the colder of the next 2 days definitely is going to be on Saturday. Tomorrow night, again, maybe an early rain or snow shower, and then just a snow shower here and there overnight tomorrow night, as a lot of the action is going on northwest of here, up over the plateau and then downwind of Lake Erie. And then Saturday just looks like Saturday to me looks like a day, a deer season type day. Gusty winds. It's mostly cloudy. It has that November look and feel, and we back off a little bit on the winds that day. I don't think we're going to go over 40. They do back off some if you look at the profiles, but certainly I think 30, maybe 35 miles per hour or so. We've got gusts on Saturday, and again, I'd be surprised if there weren't at least some flurries around. No big deal for the most part. And I thought that it's mainly in the morning. I want to say mainly. I've seen times where, oh yeah, it's going to dry out. It's like, a lot of times it's like it's until that last isobar oriented out of the northwest goes by, it just keeps hanging on. Certainly the clouds and the gusty winds if you're in the right place. So, but better weather on Sunday. If you have some outdoor plans, I still have some outdoor stuff I've got to get done, like raking leaves and, you know, doing all that kind of stuff before it really gets into winter. So I think we got a good day Sunday. Definitely less wind. A little bit of a breeze. The high looks like it's going to build into the southeast, and so there is still some gradient that day, but it's not nearly as windy on Sunday as what it will be Saturday. And after a cold start to the day, we should be up into the low, perhaps even mid-50s by the afternoon. Next week, I mean, I don't know if you guys looked at the longer range, but next week looks quite balmy for this time of the year. It looks like a pretty high amplitude pattern and a very you know, a warm pattern shaping up for the early and maybe most of next week actually, but certainly a well above normal temperature pattern regime setting up for next week. So that's what I have as far as the actual PowerPoint presentation. We could go to the animator if you'd like and look at some stuff, but we could also take some questions now. Discussion about our upcoming weather or anywhere close by, or anybody have any? I know there was a question before about Erie. You know, do they see some snowflakes? And maybe it's illegal to say anything on that. What my opinion is. Do they see any snowflakes? What do you guys think? Think there's any snowflakes that are visible that are actually going to be seen in Erie? Water temps are warm. It's early in the season. You know, what are the thicknesses? I'll ask you that. I'll tell you this. This is just from my memory, early season or, you know, late fall and early winter. I remember a situation one time back in probably either the late 90s or early 2000s, and I was doing a forecast for Buffalo, and they had a flow off the lake like a 240 flow or so. The thickness that day, this was like around November 30th, give or take. Let's say as just a target date. The thickness that day was like 526, 527, and it was 37 degrees and raining in Buffalo. But you go like a mile or two inland, it was snowing to beat the band. So it just goes to show you that you know, the boundary layer this time of year is a major issue. Unless you have it cold enough, it is tough. But then again, if you have enough, if it's the time of the day is right, that's the other thing. You know, what time of the day it is. So that's a good question. You know, inland it's a no-brainer. I mean, we know it's going to snow. So, you guys have any
last questions for Dave here? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next week is Dan DePato and also from AccuWeather.
Oh, before you guys go,